my attention, my devotion are captured by your face. With eyes of fire and hair like wool, undone in your embrace. There's no one like you. There's none beside you. Holy, 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 all the angels cry out. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. Holy, 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 we join in heaven now. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. The Lion of Judah, the Lamb of God, who is this like his King? The Lord Almighty, clothed with glory, yet filled with love so deep. There's no one like you, no one beside you. Holy, 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 all the angels cry out. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. Holy, 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 we join with heaven now. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. Face down on the ground. And oh, how beautiful, oh, how glorious is the man who's seated on the throne. And oh, how beautiful, and oh, how glorious is the man who's seated on the throne. Holy, 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 all the angels cry out. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. Holy, 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 we join with heaven now. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. Holy, 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 we join with cry out. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. Holy, 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 we join with heaven now. Just wanna look at Jesus, and I'm face down on the ground. Falling on my knees in worship, giving all I am to seek your face. Lord, all I am is yours. My whole life I've rescue, and I wanna be where you are. And I call, you answer, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. In my life, be lifted high in our world, be lifted high in our love, be lifted high. In my life, be lifted high in our world, be lifted high in our love, be lifted high. And I call, you answer, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. And I call, you answer, and you came to my rescue, and I wanna be where you are. Before I drew a single breath, before that light had touched my skin, you formed me. Before I even knew you cared, and every moment since, you've been there for me. It's still you that I want. It's still you that I want. It's still you that I want. After everything, still my everything. Before I heard about the cross, to Calvary and beyond, to know me. From when I played the prodigal to when I stumbled home, your love came running. It's still you that I want. It's still you that I want. It's still you that I want. After everything, it's still everything. It was you inside the desert when I had nothing to eat. It was you back in the fire saying, child, you're safe with me. It was you that tamed the lions when they drifted off to sleep. It was you that held the waters so I barely with my feet. It was you that draws me closer. It's your hand that's guiding me. When your shoulder that I cry on, how those shoulders carry me. It's the way stripes that brought me healing. It's your death by which I rise. It's your grace don't have a body. It means death ain't keeping mine. It's your song I sing forever. I didn't come but death by time. Let the angels laugh in 1,000 years. From my heart desires to tell you. It's still you that I want. It's still you that I want. After everything, you're my everything. It's still you. It's still you that I want. It's still you that I want. After everything, still not everything. After everything, still not everything.
If you are new here, we've been in the book of Matthew in the Bible in the New Testament. It's the first book of the New Testament. We are in chapter 5, and Jesus has been delivering this message to followers, people that are just wanting to know more about Jesus, about this kingdom that he keeps talking about. And Jesus is about to say something so countercultural and so jarringly beautiful that if we're paying attention, you're going to want to duck on this one, because here's what he says in verse 38. He says, "You have heard that it is said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, and I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your shirt, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks from you. Do not refuse the one who would borrow from you, because you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies." And that's just kind of where we pause. And you just kind of sometimes need to breathe that in. I mean, love your enemies. Who would do stuff like that? I go, well, Jesus does, and he does it repeatedly. And it's not just a suggestion like, hey, here's a really bonus round for the spiritual elite. For those of you that are going for the extra bonus, he's like, no. This is actually the normal. Like, this is kingdom culture 101, basic foundation to following Jesus, to being a Christian, to following this lifestyle. This is what it means to follow him. I'm going to pray before we go any further. So, Jesus, give us the courage to try and live the words that you say in our actual lives, in our day-to-day lives, how we actually live, how we talk with people, interact with people, and not just maybe some hypothetical situation where, oh, it's a really good idea, but right in the middle of our Monday, and when we have these awkward conversations and we have bruised relationships in our family and our friends, and when we sit in these broken situations that are in our everyday life. Fill us with your Spirit. Amen. So imagine with me, what if the people who'd heard Jesus first say these things, they're hearing him say this, if they actually started to do it? These dusty-footed, calloused-handed first-century followers from these different towns that were all coming to hear the things that Jesus had to say, we're like, okay, let's actually try this. He's saying to do it. What if we actually tried to live this way? What would happen? And what would it look like if we actually turned the other cheek? What if we gave them our jacket after having our shirt taken from us in a court battle, which is what we learned last week, how the context. And when someone said, sure, to a Roman soldier, I will carry your gear, and when I get to the end of that first mile, I'm going to totally surprise you. I'm going to walk a second mile, and then I'm going to, at the end of it, just bless that soldier who is oppressing me. And I picture these two Roman soldiers who are on a lunch break. They're sitting there, and they pull out their lunches, and they've got their leather armor that's creaking, and their sandals, they've kicked them off, and they're just kind of sitting by this stream, and they're hanging out. They're pulling out jerky out of their little bags, and one of them leans back, and he's got this fig in his mouth, and it's kind of, he's talking with food in his mouth. No one ever does that. And he leans back and says, something weird, man. These Jews, have you noticed? They're acting really weird. There's something different. Another guy's like, yeah, now that you say that, yeah. Like, I slapped this one guy on the cheek. I mean, it was a good backhand. It was funny. I got him. And it's just like this disciplinary backhand. And then he looked at me right in the eye, and he wasn't scared. He wasn't angry either. But he just stood there. And he looked at me, and then he turned his head with this look on his face that was like, if you need to hit me again, you can. If that's what you need to do. And it kind of freaked me out. These Jews, something's going on. Another one's like, right, yeah, something weird's happening. And yesterday, I made this one guy, I made him carry my pack, because it's what we do. It was funny. But he didn't just carry it 1 mile. He kept walking. He went like 2 full miles. And he didn't say a word. He was just whistling the whole time. And then he said he would pray for my mom who was sick. And these two Romans are just looking at each other. And they don't realize it, but something starts to happen in both of them. Something is shifting in their souls because they're getting caught in this undertow of God's love and grace. And they're starting to pull away from the grip of Caesar, and they're drawn into a kingdom they don't even yet understand. Because that is the subversive genius of Jesus. It's kind of this third way that we've been talking about, where you're not fighting when you're being hurt or put down, and you're not acting cowardly. And it's not about just, I got to be nice, and I got to put a smile on my face, or I have to do this right thing. It's kind of more this bold, creative refusal to let violence shape you, whether it's to make you cower and cringe and be passive, but it's also not, I'm going to fight back and I'm going to hurt. And it's starting to learn to stand tall, even with a bloody cheek, and say, you can hurt me, but that doesn't have to define who I am. And so this is in Romans 12:21, it says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Because that is the way of Jesus. That's the way of love that Jesus is challenging you and I to live in every day of our lives. Because here's the deal. If we fight back, if we retaliate, if someone hurts us, so we hurt them back, all that does is repeat the cycle. And it's also, we don't want passive acceptance, where we just, someone hurts me and I have to take it, because then that just allows this kind of cycle to continue. But Jesus, he's saying, this is what I want to invite you into. I want to bring you into this wild, imaginative, creative kind of continuation of this third way that exposes evil without actually becoming evil. And it starts to reframe this whole conversation about what power is. So we go back to these two Roman soldiers, and they're talking about power, the kind that Rome has given them, because they're soldiers, and so they have this authority, or really they just have this power, and they've got the threat of the whole Roman Empire behind them. They have weapons, and if you hurt them, they will hurt you back, and they will punish you. And their idea is, you do what I tell you, or else. There's always this undercurrent of a threat. But Jesus walks by, and he's kind of got this, hair full of this desert wind smell, and he's got these beautiful eyes like eternity. And he's coming in, and he's never been rushed a day in his life, and he joins this conversation, I imagine, with these two Roman soldiers, because that's kind of what he did. And he sits down in my mind, and he has this conversation, and kind of how he does it with tax collectors and prostitutes and fishermen and the doubters and the religious elite and the nobodies and the somebodies. And he just starts a conversation with them. Because power isn't about leverage. It says power is about you obey me because the world revolves around me because I'm so important. And you have to do it because I have the ability to make your life miserable if you don't do it. And that is the framework of how the Roman Empire worked. And that's how a lot of boardrooms work. It's how a lot of parenting works. Relationships, jobs. If we're going to be honest, it's maybe even something how you and I work. It's kind of maybe for some of us our wiring. Or maybe it's our default. Especially as a dad, it would be really easy to always squash my kids. Several months ago, I was driving on SR4, and I suddenly these red and blue lights were going off. And I wasn't sure. I'm sure there was an emergency beyond me, so I pulled over to allow this car to go by, but he didn't. He stayed right behind me. State trooper. And it was a new one. I was like, oh, I can't talk my way out of this one. He doesn't live in my neighborhood. Oh. I didn't really want to get pulled over. Bad things happen with insurance, bank account, possibly my internal organs if you don't comply. So I'm like, what did I do? What did I do? He's like, your headlight's out. It was a simple thing. It was on my to-do list. I meant to fix it. But from that moment on, the stress of that moment rose that to-do list. It went to the very top. Fix this headlight, because I don't like the idea of having these encounters with state police, at least not in that context where they're in charge, because he had power. And power makes people move. And I needed to respond to keep myself safe, and that was the best thing to do. But authority is a different word, and sometimes we can mix power and authority together, because the kind of authority that Jesus had, what he was after, was a different kind of, and it was a different kind of thing, because authority is an influence. It's a different kind of leadership. It's a different kind of ability to shape who we are. Authority makes people want to move. Authority doesn't come with a badge or a title or a raised voice like power. Authority comes from a life that kind of radiates something that is real, something that's right, something that it motivates, it encourages, it helps others around us want what they have. Have you ever been around someone where you're like, I don't even know what it is that they have, but there's something there, and I want what they have, but it's not power. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. I'm just assuming you're with me on this. Real authority says, follow me, and people do because there's something there. I want that. I want it. Not because they're being dragged down or forced or coerced or made to. See, I had a high school teacher, this English teacher. She was amazing, Mrs. Wetzel. Maybe you've met her. It was down in Santa Barbara. Wonderful woman. I really enjoyed her. God bless her. I hope she's not listening, because I was also really mad at her because she made me memorize 100 words, spelling words a week. Every week, 100 new words. I mean, if it was 10, that would have been fine, but it was 100, and they're always hard every week. And I would rather gargle broken glass than have to do 100 words a week. And some weeks I hated her with the heat of 1,000 suns. But if I wanted to pass that quiz on Friday, I had to obey what it is that she was telling me I had to do. That was power, because if I didn't do it, she would fail me. And I did not want to be failed for my English class. I had I had a need. I was very passive aggressive, but at the same time, I was very codependent. And I was a weird mix of jumbled, but this codependency in me would rise up saying, I need her acceptance, even though I can't stand her. I hate her. And so I would do it every week. But years later, I had this professor when I was at seminary, and it was the first year. I don't even know why I went to grad school, because I thought I hated school so much. But I went to seminary, I was in grad school, and I had this professor named Dr. Whiteman. And the day I walked into his class, there was something different about him. And I just thought, I love this man. And I ended up taking every class he ever offered. And it didn't matter what the class was. I knew I was going to sign up for it, because when he walked into a room and he was physically small, he's like 5'4", and he had this big beard, and he would just walk up and stand, and he was kind of a nervous man, and so kind of like me, and he was always moving. But it never bothered me, because when he would talk, you just knew there was this quiet fire inside of him. And when he would open the Bible and his soul at the same time, you could feel it, and you would learn from him. And I said, whatever he has to say, I want him to pour into me, and I want to be like him. I want to know the things that he knows, and I want to know more about everything he has to share. And I never missed a class unless I was literally vomiting in my apartment. I was never going to miss a class. And I was like, this is what it is to want to go to school. I never knew that. This is what school is about, is where I can't get enough, and I want to learn, and I want to go, and I want to grow, and I want to be shaped, and I will work my butt off for him, and I want him to be proud of me. I was like, that was authority that he had in my life. Matthew 7:29 says, he taught them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. Jesus never once said, obey me or else. What he said over and over and over is, come and follow me. And people did, by the thousands upon thousands. And fishermen would drop their nets. Tax collectors left their spreadsheets. Women at wells, they ran into the towns they were trying to avoid, because when Jesus spoke, something awakened in them, because he had this authority. He had this influence. And here's the crazy thing. When you and I walk in this way of Jesus, connected to the living God, not just believing in God, but we actually start to pattern our lives after the ways of Jesus, we actually start to carry that same authority. Not the authority where we can boss people around, but it's the authority to shape the atmosphere, to bless other people, to forgive other people, and to bring healing into their hearts and lives, the authority to surprise others with just love and acceptance and embrace, and maybe to even melt these Roman soldiers' hearts, or to change maybe your workplace or your family dynamic where you're like, I don't see how anything is ever going to change. And it's not by flexing power or by winning. It's not by shouting louder, but by walking that second mile, by giving the extra cloak, by loving the unlovable, by turning the other cheek, not because we're weak, but because we're strong enough to show the world what real authority and love is. There's this guy named Tony Campolo. He tells a story, and it stayed with me. It's about a town in Pennsylvania, and it's called Norristown, just this regular American town. And the front porches and backyards and people, they mow their lawns diagonal just like we do, and wanting to impress their neighbors by having the perfect hedges. But in Norristown, there was this proposal from the state hospital that came to the town council. They said, and it was this the state hospital who were taking care of people who were battling some of the most severe psychiatric illnesses, schizophrenia, severe depression, paranoia, the kind of stuff that battles inside of people where you can't always see it, but it just tears people up, and they're not the people that we want at our nice, happy little dinner parties. And some of these people at the state hospital, they were getting better, and they didn't need to be at the hospital anymore. They'd kind of come through the worst of it, and the doctors and therapists, what they're wanting is they're like, we need help to find a place for them as they want to go to the next phase and stage of their lives. We don't just want to throw them back into the world that's full of chaos, but we want to have kind of a halfway house, a place where they can kind of adjust, a safe house, maybe in a neighborhood or a space where they can re-enter society and to be able to do it in a community that allows them to have dignity and support and kind of a soft place to land. Well, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a really good idea. So they were at this little community, this little town, saying, we think this could be the right community that could help these people who really need a safe place. Except that when the neighborhood started to hear about it, this community, they started to get really angry. They're like, no. And 500 people from the community, they showed up and packed the city council meeting. 500 people, all of them full of fear. And fear always kind of wears a very reasonable disguise. And they started to say things, well, we're just worried about our children. Are they going to be safe? And well, this is going to bring the wrong kind of people to our community. And what if they actually stay? And do we really have the resources to help them? And what about our property values? And it came to a vote. And it was unanimous. No, we don't want these kind of people in. No house, no healing, not here. And this is a true story. And then 10 minutes later, and this was a while ago, Mother Teresa actually walked in. And not a joke. She just happened to be in the area. She hears what was happening. She doesn't walk in and pull rank. She doesn't quote stats. She doesn't even get mad. She comes in and she literally just gets on her knees. And before this room of suited officials and nervous residents, this tiny Albanian woman, she drops to the floor, she clasps her hands and begins to pray on behalf of these children of God. Please, she says, do not shut them out. Welcome them. Make space for them to heal among you. And she wasn't speaking from behind a microphone. She didn't have this position or authority in the community. She wasn't a part of the community. She had no vote. She had no power to actually change any of them. But what she did have is she carried authority. And when this genuine authority walks into a room, this kingdom-soaked, cross-shaped, power-surrendered authority, everyone knew it. And after hearing her plea, one of the council members, he stands up and says, I move that we rescind our vote. And another voice said, I second it. And then another vote started to come in. It was unanimous. And not one person grumbled. Not one person in the audience tried to say, no, we're still not going to do it. And something happened. And they started to vote it in because something greater than a petition or a protest had entered the room. There was a presence that came into that room. It wasn't this coercion. It wasn't, a stronger authority or more power. It wasn't domination. It wasn't even a slick presentation or persuasion. It was just this authority of this tiny little woman who walked in, who says, I see something you don't, and there's a better way that we can walk. It was just this authority, the kind that Jesus carried when he looked at a leper in the eyes. It was the kind that he had when he forgave a woman who was caught in adultery. It was the kind that silenced the storms, not because he shouted, but because he knew who he was, and he knew his intimacy and connection to the living God, to his Father. And that kind of authority doesn't come from position. It comes from a life connected to God. There's this man named Jean Vanier, similar to Mother Teresa, maybe quieter. He's very lesser known, but he was just as radiant of a man. And he gave his whole life to people that most societies ignored. It was people with mental and developmental disabilities. The kinds of people that we walk by at grocery stores without seeing, the ones who hide behind labels and lock doors. And he started these little communities all across the world called L'Arche. Maybe you've heard of them if you are a fan of Henry Nouwen. Henry Nouwen worked at some of these communities, which L'Arche means the ark, like Noah's Ark. Places where people who were with intellectual disabilities and people with and without, they can live together in these communities. They can eat together, they laugh together, they celebrate life together, they sing off key and cry together, where power is not the point. Presence is, where dignity doesn't come from your IQ, but from the fact that you are made in the image of God and everyone is equal in this space. And they start to live out this radical third way. Not power, not control, but just presence. And Vanier, he was this simple man. He didn't wear these flashy clothes. He wasn't a powerful man. But when he spoke, you could feel it, and it shaped your heart because he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just lived 5 decades among those that the world called weak. And in doing so, he discovered what true strength really looked like. And Mark chapter 1:22 says, the people were amazed at his teaching of Jesus because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. And you can almost hear the subtext that goes through this. Those other guys talk a lot, but Jesus actually lives this. There's a lot of ways that we can get power in the world. And some folks are born into it. Maybe your parents had it, and so you take over maybe the family business or some structure that you kind of move into. Other people, they buy it, they climb ladders built from dollar bills, or they get endorsements. And some people build it over time, brick by patient brick, trying to get power so that maybe we can feel more confident or secure or safe. But authority, that's something different. When people were around Jesus or Mother Teresa or Jean Vanier, they didn't walk away saying, man, that guy's powerful. That person is powerful. They walked away whispering, I don't know what that was, but I want more. I want to come back. How do you get that? How do you and I develop maybe that kind of an influence or effect on others? How does that even happen? And how do you become someone whose life kind of hums with this quiet thunder of the kingdom of God? The presence of Jesus. See, I imagine Jesus, he sits down with these 2 Roman soldiers from earlier, you know, these 2 that were surprised by the cheek turning in their second mile carrying Jews. And I imagine Jesus listening to their confusion, their curiosity, and smiling and says, let me tell you about one of your own, another Roman. And he starts to tell them about a certain Roman centurion. And a centurion wasn't just a soldier. The guy was in charge of 100 soldiers. This is the kind of man who knew how to keep people in line. He had power, and yet he also had a problem because he had the servant, a young one, who was dying. And the centurion, he loved the servant. And a Roman commander, wait, loving a servant? I mean, that's already, you're off script, Jesus, because that's not how the Roman Empire operates. That's not how chain of command stories go. But something about this guy is different because love starts to mess with power. And it hijacks your control, and it starts to break your heart open in a way that rank or title can't protect us from. So this Roman commander, a man used to people saying, yes, sir, standing straight, is suddenly up against something that he can't fix because death is knocking at the door of his servant that he loves. And all of his medals, all of his titles, his rank, his authority, his power, and his connections cannot save that servant. And then he hears about Jesus, and he sends some servants to go find him. And here's what happens next. In the book of Luke, chapter 7, it says, when Jesus wasn't far from the house, the officer sent some friends to tell him, Lord, don't go to any trouble for me. I am not good enough for you to come to my house, and I am certainly not worthy to come to you. Just say the word, and my servant will get well. Whoa. And first of all, there's something amazing in here. You've got this Roman officer who just said, he's not worthy. Don't even think to come to my house because I'm not good enough. Who thinks like that? Someone who's beginning to see the limit to their power. Someone who is on the slow, painful, holy journey from power to authority. And then in verse 8, I have officers who give orders to me, and I have soldiers who take orders from me, and I can say to one, go, and he goes, and I can say to another, come, and he comes, and I can say to my servant, do this, and he will do it. And the Greek word for orders, where they order, is actually means coming from a place of power. It's not just an instruction, it's a command. The centurion's saying, I get how power works. I understand it. I've lived in it. This is my life. This is my world. I'm used to it. But now I am face to face with something power can't change. And that's the question right there. Where do you go when your power can't get what it is you want or need? Luke 9 says, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. The officer's friends returned and found the servant well. Two things just grab me about people who are growing in authority. One, they come face to face with their own vulnerability and they don't run away. See, that centurion knew he wasn't in control anymore. And that's terrifying because if you're like me, and you're going to be honest, we all want to feel a little bit in control of our life. We want to feel like we're in control of situations. And when I'm not in control of something, I will do almost anything to get that control back and try to fix the problem. I like to avoid that feeling of vulnerability. I try to avoid those feelings of fear that creep up, and I will plan and I'll strategize and I will stress and I will stay up all night trying to figure it out. And then when I'm around you guys or anyone else, what I want to do is I'm going to try and mask it. I don't want you to see how terrified I am. Or sometimes I'll just run away from it. I'll go to coping skills that are not actually healthy and they're going to be more damaging because I'm so scared. But power, what it does is it gives me this illusion that I have some control, but then vulnerability shatters it because I really never had control. And here's the catch. You cannot grow in authority until you come face to face with your limitations. And I get it. Some of us, we don't feel powerful because maybe we've got bosses or bills or kids or chronic illnesses or depression, people who talk over us, people who underestimate us. And power isn't about maybe I can get to the top. Sometimes it's about just what can I bring to the table in a relationship? Maybe if I just had something to offer, if I just had wisdom or money or experience or charisma, then I have some power. But when you walk into a room where you have nothing to offer, when the advice you have just dries up or falls onto the ground, when your cleverness and charisma, it can't really fix this situation, and when your words are they're hollow and empty, that is what is the sacred ground right there. Because that is where authority has the ability to start growing. When you have someone crying in front of you, there's nothing you can say to stop or shape or help them. And you're about to say something, some nice little bumper sticker quote. You bite your tongue. Have you ever gotten that call from someone who really needed help? I just need your help. I need to process. And they're spilling your guts, and you just listen. And I really, do you know the poll? I want to say something brilliant right here, right now, so that they will say, that's exactly what I needed. Oh, you saved my life. Oh, thank you, Kenny. And you hang up the phone, and you're feeling like Gandalf the Wise, and yes, You're stroking your beard. Oh, and that's not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing when God allows us to walk in each other's sacred lives and actually have something to say. But if we're not careful, we start to need that feeling. I need to have that right thing, because if I don't, I look like an idiot. And so then we start to define ourselves by what it is that I do for people. And then one day you're sitting with someone who's just going through something devastating, so soul-crushing, and you realize, I can't say anything to help them. And I feel helpless, and now I feel exposed, and I feel like an idiot, and I'm powerless. And in that moment, if I'm brutally honest, part of me still wants to look like I'm helpful. I want to be seen as wise. I want to be seen as strong. Even if I'm not actually helping, I still want to look the right part, because I don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't want to feel vulnerable. That's more important than the actual thing that the person going in front of me that they're going through. Because vulnerability starts to expose the lie of my need for control. Because authority isn't built on a spotlight, it's built in the shadows where no one is clapping and you're not sure that you're doing anything right. So here's the third way to think about, just to think about. As we start talking about authority and vulnerability, what if when you're sitting with someone who's in deep gut level pain, the kind of pain where the air in the room feels thick and holy, what if the only thing you had to share was your mutual sense of vulnerability and brokenness? What if instead of giving advice or fixing or saying, I remember when I went through this, which is what many of us do the second we hear someone, either we want to connect to them so they know, but I'm better than that. I'm not where you are now. I'm ahead of you. But what if we just shut our mouths and listened? Would that be enough? Would that be an okay thing to do? Can I just literally be vulnerable with them? Because I feel so exposed, like they came to me because maybe I thought I was supposed to have the answer, or I'm supposed to fix them, but I don't like this fact that maybe I don't have the right words, and maybe I think I do, but I'm still going to shut up. Because if someone is really serious about growing in authority, not just looking the part, but really becoming someone whose life resonates with this kingdom gravity, I think they would have to become intentional about moving forward toward vulnerability instead of masking it, hiding it, or running from it. It's like a discipline. It's like a calling. Like it's the Jesus way. And a couple of thoughts about how we might actually do that. Number one is move toward people without power. Starting there, right there. I don't know if you've ever spent time with people who do have mental disabilities. And I mean really spent time. Like long enough to not just be a helper or a teacher, but long enough to just be human together. And if you have, then you know that your resume and your skills and your titles mean absolutely nothing. They're totally irrelevant. Your degrees, your salary, your parenting trophies, your theology bookshelf, what you know about God, none of that matters. They have one question: do you just love me? That's it. Do you love me? Are you going to accept me? Can we smile together? Can we sing a song together? And the thing is, you can't explain it. You can't fake it. They know by the way that you look at them if you're honest and real and vulnerable, or if you're not. By the way that you touch them or don't. Do you love me? The most fundamental question of humanity. And the folks that the world tries to ignore or hide, they ask it better than anyone else because they will go right to it first thing. And that's why many people are uncomfortable around them, because they make me feel vulnerable. Because I can't impress them the way that maybe I'd want to impress people. And that's not how I get into their hearts. You can only show up. undistracted, unfiltered, and vulnerable and just completely undone. And the crazy twist is if Jesus had as much authority as we say he did, as I believe he did, he must have been the most vulnerable human being who ever lived. Breathe that one in. Just hold that one. If he had as much authority as we think he had to have been the most vulnerable, open human ever. But we don't always think of Jesus that way. I mean, we want to imagine, Jesus, you're strong, you're composed, you're radiant, like some spiritual action figure, and you're glowing with power. You know everything, you do everything. But try this on for size. How do you love the whole world, knowing that most of the world isn't going to love you back, and still love them anyway? Not because, well, it's the contract I made because I'm God, or not from a distance, but to truly love the world and everyone. And it can only happen if you're going to be willing to live in a profound vulnerability with each other. And then we remember, the last question that Jesus asks Peter was, will you serve me? Or will you lead really well? Or will you die a martyr's death for me? He says, Peter, do you love me? He says in John 21, do you love me? That's all he's asking. Not this manipulative way, not even as a teaching moment, but maybe it's the most human moment. Jesus, he was just asking the question that he'd been carrying since before the foundation of the world. And he asks you, and he asks me, that he's been asking this question to every single one of us. I just want to know, do you love me? Because I love you. And that leads to the second question. Notice when being important is important to you. I want a short story. I once went on a trip with this pastor. He was a great guy. He was wise, he's humble, and we went on this trip, and he was leading the trip. He had this vision, and he had this big idea of what he's going to do, and I was basically his entourage. And a kind of fancy way of saying is I got to hold his mug and his coffee, get him more coffee when he needed it. And I'm not going to lie, it was kind of this weird experience being with a really famous person, and he would talk with other really important famous people, and then afterward he would kind of glance at me, and I'm like, do you need a water bottle? And then the other people would look at me that he's talking to, and everyone's looking at me like, well, who are you? And none of them were being mean. They were just kind of curious, like, why am I standing in this space with famous people? And I started to notice myself, like, deep in my ego, this kind of primal thing. I just want to say, well, I want to tell you about my experience and why I belong here, and explain how important I maybe am or will be. I'm sure. I just want to be, I'm more than the coffee guy. I can also preach. I can do that. I can preach a hell of a sermon. Oh, God, can't say that. And I've read books. I've read all of your books, but maybe I'm writing a book too. Maybe you've not yet read it because I haven't written it. I can bake amazing cookies. I've got that. I'm a somebody. Yes, I do. I'll bring you all cookies next time I come here. And I can grow a good pumpkin. Totally ridiculous, but it's real how these things come up inside of us. And maybe if we're trying to walk in this way of Jesus, we need to pay attention to those moments where being important is as, there's something holy there. Because when we feel pressure to justify our presence, this is where the Holy Spirit starts to whisper, lay it down. You don't need to prove anything here because I already know who you are. And then this rabbit trail, by the way. Am I trying to prove things to God or to other people or to myself? Now I got 3 directions to go. That was my rabbit trail. I'm done. And here's the bigger picture. I think one of the most breathtaking truths about God is this: God would rather establish authority than ever exercise power. And how do I know? It says because Jesus is in the image of the invisible God, Colossians. So what did Jesus do? He gives up the power of heaven's throne to crawl into the skin and dirt and diapers and misunderstandings and betrayal and public crucifixion. Philippians 2, 5 through 7 says, have this in mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And when we read this, we often go, whoa, even though he was God, he humbled himself like this. But that's kind of the wrong tone. It's precisely because he was God that he did this, because this is who God is. He's the one who kneels, who empties, who enters into my pain, into your hurts, instead of overpowering it. Because power can never win love. It can only ask for obedience. And God isn't trying to make robots. He's looking for sons and daughters who will just love him in return. So the thing I see from the text is that the centurion about this, though, is people are drawn to the lives that carry the authority of Jesus, not just the message about him. See, the Roman centurion figured this out, that power can't save someone you love, that you can't dominate someone into healing. And Jesus, he just keeps saying, have this in mind. I just want you to live this way, because if we don't, the church becomes just another institution scrambling to try and be relevant and cool, where we throw sermons like darts at people that maybe we've never even shared a meal with in years. And the generation growing up now, they're not mad at us. They're not even rejecting what we say. They just don't seem, it doesn't seem to be making a difference in so many of their lives. But if we actually started to live this way, live this Jesus way, this kingdom of God way, I don't think we would have room in the building for all the hungry people after what is real and true. Because the world has enough people who are flexing power, not enough people who are showing vulnerability and what real authority is. What people are longing for is real authority, to see it. Matthew 28. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I will be with you even to the very end of the age. Oftentimes we read that as this proclamation. We have to go. We got to go. We got to go. We got to go. I'm supposed to go and share the message of Jesus. But maybe it's a call to embody a life, a lifestyle. It's a call to walk the way that Jesus walked, to give his authority away the way that he gave it to us, and to trade in the power and the status and our polished answers for presence and for vulnerability and for what real authority is. Because when we don't live like Jesus, we lose the authority. And when we lose authority, we start reaching for power. And when we reach for power, we stop looking like Jesus. So the question would be, is anyone willing to be courageous enough to start walking this way? Because this one is going to be hard. Where we start to move into vulnerability. And it's going to be costly, and it's radically loving this third way. Because the world is watching us. Even us, even our church. This community is watching. And they're not really looking for answers. They're looking for people who carry Jesus in their bones. So the way that we're going to kind of, just to give you a heads up how we're going to kind of start wrapping this up today. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to do one last song, but the musicians are not going to come up. It's just going to be a video that we're going to put on, And I just want to encourage you just to talk to God, whether it's through singing, whether it's through sitting, standing, however you want. But this is a moment for you to just start talking to God about who you are and who you want to be. And I'm just going to pray, and then we're going to go into the video. So Jesus, I thank you for this. Help us to become the people who would walk fearfully and honestly into places of vulnerability, and that we could grow in authority, and that we would run away from power and from its illusions, its comfort, this false sense of control, and instead embrace your way. And I just wonder with this kind of creativity of imagination, what would happen in my family, in my kids, to this community, if I did. And stop trying to win with power and start loving better with just your presence. Yeah. So anoint us, Jesus. Bless us with your authority. Teach us to love in ways that don't even make sense to the world, because you're the only one who can give it, and we need it desperately.